Euronews. Stay connected to Europe.
Good morning, it is Friday the 10th of July. I'm Maeve McMahon and this is Europe Today. Your morning roundup of the biggest European stories and the analysis that matters, live here on Euronews. Coming up, Donald Trump says the truce with Iran is, quote, over as Tehran reports a US attack near a nuclear plant. With the global economy in flux as the war intensifies, we'll bring you exclusive insights on how the European economy is faring with the President of the European Central Bank herself, Christine Lagarde. This as European finance ministers huddle in Brussels to assess the health of the European economy. On the agenda, a new proposal from Spain for a common EU borrowing mechanism worth up to 850 billion a year. We'll be hearing exclusively from the French economy minister, Roland Lescure, who'll be joining us here on set. And meanwhile, a sense of déjà vu. France bet Morocco 2-0, the very same scoreline as their World Cup semi-final meeting in Qatar back in 2022. After a pretty frustrating start, including a missed penalty, France found their rhythm and ultimately proved too strong for Morocco. But first, Europe must look at its own weaknesses, but also leverage them in a very turbulent global scenario. The words of the President of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, in an exclusive interview with Euronews' Europe editor, Maria Tadeo. For more on this wide-ranging sit-down that touched on an array of issues, I'm joined here in the studio by our very own Europe editor, Maria Tadeo. Maria, good morning. That was a very long sit-down interview you had with the President of the ECB. You touched on many issues, from the economy to President Donald Trump to China. Fill us in.
Yes, Maeve. And of course, Christine Lagarde is incredibly powerful, very influential. And this is now head of the European Central Bank, who, if she has something to say, she will say it, and you'll hear it very clearly. In this conversation, we talked about the European economy, as you pointed out. We also talked about the trajectory of interest rates. This is crucial, of course, for European consumers. The European Central Bank just had to increase interest rates as a result of a pickup in inflation because of the instability we see certainly playing out in the energy market because of the war and the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. And then we talked about Europe, a lot on Europe. She said by now the Europeans have recognized some of their weaknesses and they have to reform and they have to address those issues. She's a real champion of the Capital Markets Union, suggesting that the fact that we have billions of euros that will leave Europe to go and be invested in the US is a total anomaly, and this money should stay here. So the Capital Markets Union continues to be her priority. And then we also talked about this idea of a European safe asset. Obviously, this is a very technical debate. If you're an EU nerd, and here we are, but this is really fundamentally a question about creating a sort of, instrument, a tool that would see the Europeans borrow together to fund and pay for common projects, for key issues, including defense, but that also could create a sort of bond market that could rival the US Treasuries. And I asked her this question because this is very much in the zeitgeist, because the Spanish have picked up on a proposal initially by Mario Draghi, now saying they would like to see about 150 billion euros a year of this funding. They argue that in the end, there is a case that it could be cheaper if you reduce interest rates and the payments that individually you'd have to make by doing it collectively. I asked this question to Christine Lagarde and she told me, look, put it on the table, just debate it. Let's take a look.
It's pretty obvious that we also need to have a European asset which can, parallel with the US Treasury bonds, for instance. How we go about it, how the moral hazard is addressed, how it's allocated in terms of results to be decided. And I think it's great that a country like Spain, for instance, makes a proposal, puts it on the table for debate. And it's now for the others to say, OK, we like this part, we don't like this, we can address it.
So when you hear these numbers, 800 billion euros, Mario Draghi echoed that. The Spanish seem to be putting that on the table. The French president has said, in his view, there are no taboos. That doesn't scare you. When you hear 800 billion euros, this kind of money.
Remember what we did for COVID. That was the amount that was actually put on the table for joint borrowing in order to respond and to produce the recovery and what was it, RRF, the
Recovery and Resilience.
Yeah, Recovery and Resilience Fund. That was roughly the amount. And the Commission went to market. We helped in the process because we act as an agent in that respect, and it was widely, broadly subscribed, oversubscribed. So I'm not saying that this is the amount. I'm just saying that to go with the capital market, you need depth, you need liquidity, and you need to entice the savings of Europe onto that market.
And that is, of course, ahead of the European Central Bank. And Maeve, this is a very hot topic in Brussels. And as you know, the question of joint debt is, in essence, very, very political in Europe. It is interesting, however, that she is saying, let's debate it on merit. You'd have countries like Germany, the Dutch too, who'd say, absolutely not. We've said we would not agree. That was a one-off. We do not want this to become a constant, but the debate is certainly now out there. And then the other point, just briefly, we spoke about China. The Europeans have said now, they've set out this deadline in October. We need to see a rebalancing in the trade relationship between the Chinese and the Europeans. They have posted a massive trade surplus last year, the Chinese, and the European deficit keeps getting bigger. I asked her what happens if in October there's no deal. This is a difficult deadline because it could potentially lead to a form of retaliation. And she told me there now needs to be a serious, quote, conversation among adults when it comes to the subsidies, when it comes to the prices, when it comes to some of the practices, almost sector by sector with the Chinese, because they talk, but now they need to really walk the talk when it comes to a relationship that works for both.
And another major topic you dived into, of course, the upcoming presidential elections in France next year.
Look, there's a lot of speculation about the future of Christine Lagarde. There's really a lot of speculation as to what kind of role she could play in the campaign, but also what are the implications when it comes to the European Central Bank, because she will have to leave early, depart early. In theory, her term will end in the fall of 2027, but of course the French election will happen in the spring. I asked her this question. Some would like to see you being that European voice, and she told me she's not a candidate for anything, certainly not for the time being, but she's monitoring this election because she believes it's fundamental for France, but also Europe. Let's take a look.
As a French, I have my own views. I keep them to myself. But what I very much hope is that the democratic process will continue. In politics, the next, 8 months is eternity. So many things can happen. We will be monitoring. We will be looking at the risk level. We will be looking at all that carefully. And we hope that reason will always prevail and that France will appreciate, whoever is the leader for France, that it is one key member of Europe and that Europe is the only playground within which member states, nations, even France, can actually play a significant role. I'm not a candidate for anything, but I'm very keen that Europe is protected, that Europe is the framework within which member states operate, including France.
I'm not a candidate, but I am very keen. And Maeve, just briefly on this point, there's a lot of speculation also here in Brussels because, let's say, if Lagarde does leave the European Central Bank earlier, there could be a question because this was a package deal. She was put at the European Central Bank. Ursula von der Leyen of Germany was obviously named head of the European Commission, but this was a package. If the head of the ECB leaves, would that have a knock-on effect on the Commission? That is a serious question because it created a perfect balance between Germany and France. That could potentially change. So, of course, in Brussels, everyone monitors the future of Ursula von der Leyen. Some would argue it is connected in some ways with the future of Christine Lagarde, too.
Okay, Maria Tadeo, thank you so much for that. And of course, you can catch that full interview with the ECB President, Christine Lagarde. It'll be broadcast straight after Europe Today, so stay tuned for that. But now, for another view, coming up, we'll be joined by Roland Lescure, the French Economics and Finance Minister, an economist by trade and a very close ally of the French President, Emmanuel Macron. Minister Lescure previously served as Industry Minister and chaired the National Assembly's Economic Affairs Committee. He's in Brussels today for talks with finance ministers from all across the bloc. So we're thrilled to have you here in the studio to give us a little insight into what's going on in that meeting before you head over. I imagine the impact the war in Iran and the Middle East is having on our economy here is kind of overshadowing the talks today. Are you preparing for a potential recession?
Well, we're not there yet. Both France and, in a way, the European economies have proven quite resilient. As you know, we're not exposed directly to the crisis in the sense that there was no volume issue. We still got oil, we still got gas, we still got fertilizers. But the fact that some of the oil that was flowing is not flowing anymore to Asia has risen the prices. And obviously, this has had an impact on our consumers. You know, the oil tanks have been more expensive to fill and everything. So we've had a slow first half, for sure.
But you're not in panic mode yet. You're not preparing measures yet.
I mean, panic mode doesn't really serve any purpose. So what we've done is we've targeted measures that are tailored, temporary, to the people who are in need, the people who are mostly affected, people who travel a lot for their work, truck drivers, farmers, and we've tailored them. We've made sure that it didn't have a major impact on public finance, which is my job. And so far, so good. I think the economy has been resilient. But we need a recovery. I think that hopefully the short-term volatility that we've seen over the last couple of days will be over soon, and hopefully will be, again, taken the route towards more negotiations, more peace, and then a better economy, which is very important.
And as you say, we need a recovery. We've seen some interesting proposals by the Spanish government this week. They're proposing a new joint EU debt instrument worth up to 850 billion euros. Carlos Corpo, the Spanish Ministry for the Economy, he's also in Brussels, and he spoke yesterday to our Maria Tadeo. Let's just take a listen to what he had to say, and then I'd love to get your reaction.
Spain is actually making a pitch or a proposal to centralize part of the national issuances within the Commission, within a specific facility that can help, without increasing the total level of debt, to reduce fragmentation and therefore reduce costs and integrate further our national markets, our national financial and capital markets. And that would, at the same time, as I said, reduce also costs for our firms. So it's a win-win situation, which we hope to discuss with our colleagues right now.
So what's your view from France here? Is it a win-win situation? Would you support this?
Well, it's an interesting proposal because, as you know, usually people advocate more common debt on top of national debt. What Carlos Cuerpo is advocating is for some of the national debts to be pooled and then auctioned on the market and then lent back to the countries. So it's an interesting proposal that solves some of the issues that usually debt on top of debt can address. There's one issue that concerns me. I've talked to Carlos about it, and we need to study it further. It's the moral hazard. You know, the fact that if one country transfers the debt to the whole community, that might be an incentive for that country to take more debt. So we'll have to see. But one thing is for sure. We need euro to be even stronger, even deeper, and more liquid than it is today. And the main factors behind that, to have the euro as a top-of-the-notch global currency, we need more competitiveness, we need capital market union, we need the whole packet. And it's not just by transferring debt that we're going to manage that, but we do need, as I said, to reassure the world that, yes, they can safely lend money to the Eurozone and get it back.
And you saw we had that interview with the ECB President, Christine Lagarde. I mean, she's fixated as well with the capital market union. When will we ever have this? When will it become a reality? She's
fixated and I'm obsessed. I think you're Irish, right?
Yes.
We have a great Irish presidency started yesterday for the ECOFIN. It starts today, actually. And I believe I had talk with Simon Harris, who's not chairing the ECOFIN Council. He's really willing to nip it in the bud between now and the end of the year.
Will they manage, though? That's a challenge.
Well, that's what I'm going to say today. We need to do everything we can, both to have a deal and to have an ambitious deal, because there's no way we should water it down. And
there's a lot they want to get done before next year, because, of course, big elections taking place in your country. Yep. How will they play out?
Tell me. I don't know. It's a year away. There's still a lot of uncertainty. It's going to be an interesting election. And as you said, very important for France and for Europe. I started running. I was in a completely different world 10 years ago because we had a candidate that put the European flag in all his meetings. I do believe strongly that Europe is part of the solution, not part of the problem. We have two extremes that think otherwise.
Could it be up one extreme against the other?
Well,
Could that
I'm
be the
gonna
final
make
ticket?
Everything I can to make sure we avoid that scenario. There's a big central back in France. We need to find the right candidate to carry the flag. But I'm convinced that the absolute majority of French people want progress, want order, want unity, and we just have to make sure we convince them that there's the right person to carry that flag.
And just final congrats on the football. Who's going to win the World Cup?
Thank you. Well, if I didn't tell you France should be disappointed, right? I think we have a great team, but soccer, football is such that anything can happen between now and
We're keeping a close eye on it. Minister, thank you so
Allez les
much.
bleus, allez les bleus.
Thank you so much for coming into us today. And another topic on the table at that meeting is crypto. The European Commission has launched a consultation until the end of September in an effort to come up with new, better rules. For more on what all that means, here's our Jakob Janis.
If you are a crypto investor, you might know that the EU just built a massive financial fortress to tame the wild part of the markets. Brussels wanted to replace a chaotic patchwork of 27 national rules with one strict system. But here goes a surprise. The brand new rulebook might already be obsolete. Look, the entire crypto topic might be a bit complex, so your reporter will do his best to safely walk you through it. Ready? On 1st of July, the EU's landmark crypto rules took full effect. And the execution was a total bust for crypto firms, especially the foreign ones. Fewer than 1 in 5 of Europe's 1,200 registered crypto companies secured a license. And those who did not had to shut down. But the aim wasn't to regulate for the sake of regulating. Brussels wanted to stop crypto scams and protect everyday investors. And big brands like Coinbase cleared the bar, but giants like Binance got kicked out. And while Brussels was working its domestic markets, Washington rewrote the rules. Last summer, Donald Trump signed the Genius Act to back stablecoins. And if you are a bit unsure what they are, I'm here to help. They are digital currencies designed to be safe, by pegging their value to the US dollar. Like for like, but digital. And stablecoins are not a small business. 95% of these tokens are tied to American currency. And Trump is using this technology to expand American financial power. After all, money is power. But here goes the plot twist. According to Euronews exclusive report, the new EU rules fail to regulate companies outside Europe, so foreign companies can bypass them. And EU diplomats already admit the rules must be changed next year to better address how tokens created outside the EU are regulated. Look, I know it all sounds a bit complex, but it's worth knowing what all this crypto fuss is about. And if you want to keep your money under the bed, to me it's fine. I won't judge you.
And now moving on to another big story here in Brussels. The European Commission has proposed banning trade with Israeli settlements as part of a so-called options paper sent to EU capitals earlier this week. A majority of EU countries had been calling for proposals to restrict trade with the settlements in response to the deteriorating situation in the occupied West Bank. For more, I'm joined here in the studio by our correspondent, Mairead Gwynn. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Niamh.
Just remind us, perhaps, why there's been increasing pressure on Brussels to restrict trade with Israeli settlements.
Well, yes, Maeve, the political pressure has been increasing in recent months, particularly because of the deteriorating situation in the West Bank, violence against Palestinians there, and the way the Israeli government has also been expanding these settlements. Settlements which are, of course, considered illegal under international law and by the EU. So calls now on the Commission to really do more to restrict trade with these settlements. This is different to the calls to ban trade with Israel, or to suspend parts of the EU's trade deal with Israel, calls that have been existing as well. We've heard plenty about them on the show, of course. This is about the settlements. So the Commission finally coming forth with a proposal on Wednesday outlining potential concrete options. We first reported this on Euronews yesterday, and essentially there are 3 things on the table now. First would be to oblige companies in settlements to acquire special exporting licenses. Secondly, to place more more punitive tariffs on these products to make it more difficult for them to be imported into the EU. And finally, and crucially, Maeve, a proposal for a full or partial ban, which is what many governments have been pushing for months now. This will be discussed by EU ambassadors here in Brussels when they gather for closed-door discussions today, and then, of course, by foreign ministers when they're here in Brussels next Monday.
And the big question, everyone's wondering, how likely is it that this will pass?
Well, this is where it gets tricky, Maeve, because on paper, any trade measures in the EU should be approved by 15 member states, representing 65% of the EU population. But the Commission has suggested in this options paper that, in fact, this is a foreign policy tool and needs the unanimous backing of all member states, which is obviously a higher bar, a higher threshold to reach. And many feel that is quite unfeasible because, of course, there are many staunch allies of Israel within the Council. This is feeding into the narrative that the Commission might be delaying or even obstructing a decision. This has been slow coming. And also, although foreign ministers will have a discussion on this on Monday, we won't hear more until they gather next in October. So don't expect a decision anytime soon.
OK, we'll keep a close eye on that, Mara Gwynn. Thank you so much for that. And now it's time for the World Cup. After France booked its ticket for the semi-final last night with a 2-0 victory over Morocco, all eyes will be on Spain against Belgium tonight, who'll go face-to-face at 9 local time. Whoever wins, it's clear now that at least one European team will make it to the big final. And there's more déjà vu ahead. France against Belgium would be a replay of the 2018 World Cup semi-final, the last time France won the World Cup. And France and Spain, on the other hand, clashed more recently, remember, in the semi-final of the Euro 2024, with the better end for Spain. Whatever happens tonight, the mood here in Brussels is electric, with multiple watch parties taking place tonight. So enjoy the games. But that does bring this edition of Europe Today to an end. Thank you so much for your company. As always, take care and see you soon on Euronews.
Politics. Minutes of European political punch. Welcome to the ring.
President Lagarde, thank you so much for joining us on Euronews at this very pivotal time for Europe.